opposition to slavery that is deeply rooted in French history. And I don't think he can say both of those things at the same time, at least not in the way that he said it. And I think there was a missed opportunity. The missed opportunity was to say that, yes, Napoleon is a part of us, but so too is Toussaint Louverture, who is the leader of the Haitian Revolution. And I think that if you're going to have a sort of great man view of history, which is the view that Macron seems to share, if you're going to have such a view of history in 2021, then it should at least include all of the men who are truly great in France's past.
Can you remind us briefly Napoleon's record on slavery?
He's most notorious today for his decision in 1802 to reestablish slavery in the French Empire. And perhaps I should say a bit about what the French Empire looked like at the time. So slavery was a huge part of what made France a leading 18th century power, as was also true of Britain.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to paint. Sorry, I really don't know how to paint. I don't know how to paint.
It had a slave colony in Guadeloupe, in Martinique. St. Lucia and Tobago were also French colonies for part of this period. At the end of the 18th century, Guyana on the South American coast, Louisiana for part of the 18th century. And then there are all the colonies in the Indian Ocean, Réunion and Ile-de-France, which is now Mauritius. So about 800,000 slaves in total. And during the 1790s, revolution comes to some of these territories, especially to Saint-Domingue and to Guadeloupe. And so by 1802, Napoleon is facing a situation where France is threatened with the loss of its colonies. And it was the beginnings of peace between Britain and France in 1802 with the Treaty of Amiens that makes it possible for Napoleon to intervene militarily in an attempt to reestablish slavery, which he does by
and then Egypt on top of it.
To Saint-Domingue in an attempt to subdue the Haitian Revolution.
Then he said, "C'est nous les vrais musulmans." He said also, "We are the real Muslims."
But this decision in 1802, which the president of France described as a betrayal of the Enlightenment, is considered sort of the leading stain on Napoleon's record. In fact, it's
what about the Muslims? What about Senule? He called himself they are the real Muslims. He said that the real Arabs. I mean, the real Arabs, Napoleon.
Relationship with slavery.
It was widely known at the time, that's for sure. I mean, slavery was a huge part of the French economy, so everybody's aware that in the 18th century that France has these colonies in the New World. And now, I think France is doing better now with the memory of slavery than it was before. In 2001, a law was passed called the Taubira Law in France that recognized slavery and the slave trade as crimes against humanity. And it also created an organization that is now the foundation for the memory of slavery. And that group has been doing a lot of work to overcome a long-standing relegation of slavery to a minor place in the French past. But I think there was still a lot of work to be done, and this commemoration of Napoleon really shows it because, you know, a lot of it has taken place in the form of sort of glossy magazine covers dedicated to Napoleon. You have the Macron speech as well. I mean, the notion of Napoleon as the source of French greatness on the world stage is still very powerful. And so I think that, you know, these anniversaries are going to come
embraced by a lot of people.
I think they're only useful if they can really widen the scope of the conversation about history. And I think that a conversation that is focused on the figure...
Anyway, I just want to apologize. I don't know how to paint. That is for sure. I don't know how to paint. But I can at least read, write a little bit.
I think it's okay to take Napoleon as a starting point, but only as a starting point for thinking about the breadth of the French past and the ways in which a person like Toussaint Louverture, for example, is also a part of that
I kind of really don't know how
to
to do. So let's just do it this way.
And so, you know, the way to think about Napoleon, I think, is to take into account how the exercise of French power was felt by those on its receiving end. How Napoleon's fate was shaped by people in places like Haiti,
I really don't know how to paint.
And many other places around the world. I think that is more likely to have a useful impact than a sort of a great man view of history that commemorates one particular individual.
Historian Malak Gatchan. Kaya Diallo, I know you've done a lot of thinking on this topic as well.
Sorry, I didn't know how to paint.
Should be remembered.
Actually, to me, there is a great difference between teaching, remembering, and glorifying. And what Emmanuel Macron decided to do, unlike many former presidents, was to glorify Napoleon in his speech.
Voilà, they
He
always
said,
do to
"We love Napoleon."
glorify.
He said that
Same with
Napoleon was a
America,
genius, and
glorify.
as we just heard from the historian, the so-called
Sorry, I
military,
didn't know how to
military
paint.
genius was used to reflect very violently the revolts of the former enslaved people in Guadeloupe and in Saint-Domingue that were trying
Voilà.
to stay, to remain free, because France is actually the only country who has first abolished slavery.
Sorry,
during the
it's
French
supposed to be a
Revolution and
finger,
instituted it
finger,
during
thumb,
Napoleon, 8 years after. And that's the
you know,
reason why people revolted.
person shot him,
In Guadeloupe and
shot,
Saint-Domingue.
and
So
sorry
to
for
me,
Andrew
there
Brown
is-
Jr.
there
I
is
don't know
no-
how to.
The argument that says that
I don't know
there
how
was
to
a context
paint.
for that and that slavery was acceptable doesn't work, because when you say that, you adopt the perspective of the people who were perpetrating slavery, but not the perspective of the enslaved people who were against it. And there was
Sorry, I don't know how to donate. Sorry, I don't know how to NPR. Sorry, I don't know how to talk. Sorry.
Creating the civil code that really
Civil code, exactly. The code, good Napoleon.
of married women.
Sorry, I don't remember.
It was also misogynistic. It really
Yeah,
make
well.
women who gained some rights during the revolution lose all of them. There were in the
Yeah, exactly. Then he went through Europe and beat everybody up on top of it. And then Hegel loved him.
He belongs to history books and museums.
But they woke up. In fact, that kind of really made Germany wake up. And then from there it went.
Why do you think President Macron decided to take this stance in particular?
He went through Italy. He came in. You know, the people who opposed him are the ones from Austria. Crazy people were all slaughtered. But simply the fact that they wanted to oppose Napoleon, that was like, you know what I mean? That was like today they're heroes. But it woke up Germany. So Germany started to wake up from its romantic dreams and started to also then build an army of not only nobles but military. So basically Berlin woke up. Berlin became big.
Negative sides of historical figures like Churchill, for instance, and there's plenty to be negative about in Churchill's history.
Oh, now we have the British side, Churchill.
Through the lens of our contemporary values. I mean, how else are we supposed to judge them? We judge ourselves through the lens of contemporary values, including...
Yeah, sorry, I don't know how to paint. Anyway, I love the discussion. I love to listen because I don't know how to do anything. Difference between education and glorification, yeah, for sure.
Historical figures is absolutely necessary if we're to have a sober
Shit, I like to listen
of our own history, why
endlessly.
where we are today.
And all I can do is to listen radio.
About Napoleon's history of slavery
Sorry
or
for that.
misogyny and his oppression of women. So this
Oppression of
debate
women
has
on
served
top
at
of
least
you,
that
oh my
purpose.
God.
It's educated me
Yeah,
in
it's kind of
Napoleon's
true,
more
I mean.
negative sides, not
I mean,
that was
we're not
Macron's
the only one.
intention at all.
Well, Rakaya, has the debate really changed a lot of minds inside France? Do you think, are
Then
people still talking about it?
much more.
Yes, it's a major debate, and I also forgot to say
In
that
terms of
Napoleon also
languages, he
adopted
was
measures that was very
also
discriminatory to
annoyed.
Jews. So many minorities were subjugated by Napoleon. But at least he gave us the opportunity to discuss who he was and what politics he created in France.
Karen, if we go back to the UK and UK history, who do you think is up for kind of a re-examination?
Well, as I mentioned, I think Winston Churchill is the foremost one. He's celebrated as the greatest Englishman of all time, widely celebrated around the world, and for good reason, because of his role during the Second World War. But there is plenty to be critical about in terms of
Then wait until, I mean, that's the problem, because then the Germans want to start as well.
what is pretty clear is his racism.
Anyway,
the way he talked about other races was
Oh,
that he talked about the supremacy
neat.
of the white race, and he talked about uncivilized tribes who deserved to be bombed in Iraq and Kurdistan, and his attitude
Trump.
towards Gandhi. One of the interesting things I was reading about was that one of the reasons people didn't take his warnings about Hitler so seriously was that he'd used exactly the
All
same
right.
sort of
We're gonna have to leave our discussion of Churchill there, I'm afraid, for now. You're listening to
Churchill,
Weekend
and
on
then
the BBC World Service. Do stay with
mention
us.
everything, then put a Mao on top of that, okay? So, you know what I mean? This is so crazy. Historiography. History. Sorry for that. Good night.